Hi folks, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, and in this video we're going to be talking about paint. Now paint is a pretty large subject, so we have to drill down to a few topics. Nevertheless, in part number one we talked about paint guns and what you should buy, what is a good buy, what is not a good buy, according to me at least that is. And now it's all about the products, painting systems. And this is going to be all about paint, because paint is a very complex matter, and I'm by no means an expert, but I'm still going to try to explain you what I know about paint. And if you need exact details, please go and see your service centers, please go and see your paint shop, because these guys are the experts. I'm going to mine always in where I live in Oudenaarde, and they always have given me very good advice, and a lot of the things I'm going to tell you now is what I got from them anyway. So paint. Not every paint is the same. There's basically two large families of paint. There is what I call the mono-application paint, and there is what I call the multi-application paint. Now, mono-application paint is the paint whereby the glossiness, the shine, and the color is all in one liquid. So you pour that stuff in your paint gun and you paint the vehicle with it. Maybe one or two coats. And that's it, you're done. That is what we used to do in the old days. You know, very old cars, old timers, they were painted with cellulose paint, and they would put 10 coats up like this and polish it in between. But the color and the shine is in the paint. It's one application. That's what I call it, a mono application paint. Then later, with the metallic paints and the special effects paints, we moved to what we call a multi-application paint, whereby you're placing a base coat, the color, but there's no gloss on it, there's no protection on it. That's what you spray first in 2 or 3 coats onto your vehicle, and then you apply a clear lac on top of that, or a varnish as we call it sometimes, and you do that in 2 or 3 coats as well. So that is the multi-application approach. Now the mono-application approach, where the paint and the gloss is all in one paint, that's very difficult to paint with. It's not very forgiving. So if you're a novice painter, I wouldn't go for that. I would really recommend you to go for the multi-application paint, because in between the layers of paint you place, you can correct mistakes, you can take out dust and all that. And in fact, with your clear coat, you can even buff it up afterwards and buff out little imperfections. So that is why the multi-application paint is far more attractive for a novice, and it's certainly very good. In fact, it's the varnish that gives you all the strength and the protection for your paint. So these are the two big paint families. Now obviously, within every family you have different chemical products for the paint. Now even the mono application paint or the multi-application paint, they can come as cellulose, acrylic, or polyurethane paint, and probably there's a couple of others, so that all depends what you want to use. And then you have the water-based paints. Now I don't think that water-based paints are suitable for your do-it-yourself guy like me and you, most likely, because you need special drying techniques and you need to warm it up and need infrared lights and all that kind of stuff. Things that I don't have and the most do-it-yourself guy doesn't have. So we are kind of doomed to use solvent-based paint, and there's nothing wrong with solvent-based paint, although the environmentalists, they have a problem with it, but I don't, and you probably don't either because you're looking at this video. So solvent-based paints are great. Now I'm going to give you one example. What I have here is what I'm going to need just to paint the sill of the Lotus Elise, and you'll see that later, but I just want to give you that one example. So first of all, depending on the underground that you're going to paint, if it's a metal-based vehicle, or is it a polyester-based vehicle, or is it a plastic panel, because some cars now have plastic bumpers, you're going to have a primer. And the primer that you will have to use is determined by the material you're going to apply it to. So in my case, if I have a polyester-based or a plastic-based vehicle or a component or a fender or a door, I will have to apply first of all something what we call an adhesion improver, and this is an adhesion improver. There's a number on this one because it's a very specific brand, but it doesn't really matter. If you go to your paint shop and you tell them, listen, I need to paint a plastic bumper and I want to start from scratch, then I need an adhesive improver, then they will give you the right product for that. So that's the first thing I need to do. So I will paint that on there. Now that's very liquid, so you don't really need to paint it thick, just light coat on that. On the other hand, if you have an old truck like Old Rusty and you sandblasted it, then you want to put an epoxy primer straight on the bare metal after you sandblasted it. And even then afterwards you can put putties on it or whatever you feel unevenness on top of the epoxy primer. But you have to do it within 24 hours. So that is another primer that you would need for straight onto the body shell of a metal car like Old Rusty. So as you can see, depending on what the surface, the underground is, you need to apply something. Now back to the polyester, the Lotus Elise shell. Once I applied the adhesive improver, now it's time for a base coat, or actually I should say a primer, to mix it into a certain ratio, and I will have to add on top of that hardener into it, so, or an accelerator, different names for that. So I need both a thinner and an accelerator to mix my base paint to the proper properties, and that's why you need these little cups with all the markers on to do that. That's very important that you have that correct. You can do it on a scale as well, because sometimes it gives you in grams and sometimes it gives you in parts. So do the right mix. Now often you might have to adjust these things depending on the temperature in the boot or the environment you're spraying in. So you put about 1.5 coats or 1 coat of this primer on the vehicle, then you're gonna let it dry about, depends a bit again on the temperature, but let's say about an hour or so. And you see it when it becomes very dull, then you sand it up again with about wet paper, let's say 1200, 1500, and then you're kind of ready. You clean it all up again, and I have a separate video on preparing all this, so you'll see all that. And once you've done with that, then it's time for your real base coat. And the real base coat, I have that one right here. This is the color that I need to get onto my vehicle. Now I'm going to apply 2-3 coats of the base coat, and you can get the base coats built to whatever color you want. In fact, if you take a sample of your car and you take it to the paint shop, they can build the paint for you, so it's an exact match of the paint that you have already on your car. Unless you paint a complete car, then it's less of important. Anyhow, again, that base coat, you will have to put some thinner in to make it thinner. Again, on the right proportions. Again, you have to use a bucket for that and stir it all up very well. And you will have to have an activator being put into that one. Sorry, the activator is over here. That's that part. So, not very complicated so far. And then at the end, when you've done 1 coat, you let it dry. Then you put your 2nd coat on, your 3rd coat, and then the base coat is done. The car is now in a color, but it doesn't have no protection at all, because the real protection is coming from the gloss paint or the varnish that you're putting on it, or the clear lac as they call it, that you're going to put on it. I have some clear lac over here, and again the clear lac is going to need some hardener, and I have that over here as well. So in fact the hardener is over here. I don't know exactly, I can't see the numbers from here. So anyway, you need hardener for that as well. So these are all different parts you're going to have to mix and match with each other, and they all have numbers typically. So that's what you need to get to paint the car. And then finally I will have sprayed 2 or 3 coats of clear lac onto the vehicle, and then we all set. So the point is actually, don't get afraid of this. Yeah, go to your shop and tell them what you want to paint. Tell them that you want a multi-application paint, because that's the easiest part for a do-it-yourself guy. Tell them that you want to work with solvent-based paint, and make sure you don't get water-based paint, but solvent-based paint, and ask them, I need a primer or an etch primer, I need a primer, and then I need my base coat, and I need my clear lac, and that's what you need to tell them. And then they will give you all the right products, and then you should always ask for the data sheets. And I have the data sheets of every little product here. I have the data sheet for the VR1120. I have the data sheet for the Centauri 6000. This is my base coat. And on there you will find all kind of details of what kind of a thinner, what kind of an accelerator, what kind of temperatures you need, but it will also tell you things about the nozzle of your new spray gun. It also talks about the pressure that you will have to use to paint properly. And it talks often about the viscosity of the paint. Now, you don't need to measure the viscosity anymore because that is given by the graduation or the proportions of the thinner and paint and the activator or even the retardant if you need that. So all kind of things they will give you. And get this, read it through. It's not complicated. Because if you don't get these data sheets, you're not going to remember. At least I don't remember it. And this, guys, is really all about painting. So if you're going to go for a mono application paint, then you don't have all these issues. You're probably going to have your paint, and you're going to have your thinner, and you're going to have probably a hardener to put into it, and that's going to be about it to paint the color on the car. But of course, before that, you also have to put the primer on, or the edge primer. These are things you will have to do first, always, and anyhow, you would have to do that. So I hope I was able to explain that a bit to you. It is not very complicated, but then again, it's something you need to consider. And of course, you will need some additional products like a cleaner. This is the cleaner to wipe off the surfaces before you do any kind of painting. It's degreasing, it's dewaxing, and it also removes some silicone residues that you might have on it. And if you start to prepare your paint, you're going to need some filters. These are the filters. So before you start pouring the paint into a bucket, you should use those filters. Always filter your paint, guys. This is so important. And then you can use these little buckets to pour the paint in together with a filter. And then you can mix it to the right properties. And mixing the paint with the hardener or the accelerator or the thinner is done typically with what we call a stick. And this is a box full of those sticks. And again, they have to be dust-free and they are easy to use. They are not expensive at all, and it's handy. You can do it with a wooden stick as well if you want. That's up to you. Taking shortcuts with painting, guys, doesn't work. You got to do it right, and you have to get the right products. If you're not sure, double check and triple check, because otherwise the result will be disastrous and you will have to start all over again. Also remember that painting your own car is not that expensive as you would get it done in a paint shop. But on the other hand, it's not cheap either. The paint job that I have to do with all the products that I have right now for the Lotus Elise, and it's a complete repaint. It's the front clamshell, the rear clamshell, the sills, and some other parts. It's gonna cost about $1,000 on all the products, but of course I'm not going to use all the products. So some I can use later on as well. For instance, what I haven't shown you is a thinner or a cleaner for the paint gun, because you will have to clean up all these things afterwards. So that's one more thing. And then of course I haven't really talked about how you have to degrease the vehicle or the part that you're going to paint with a cleaner. That's another product you're going to need, but of course you don't need a full can of that for the Lotus Elise. But then again, you have to have it, and you'll see more products and tag rags and sanding paper and wet and dry and putties in the next video when we are preparing the outer shell of the Lotus Elise to be painted. So I hope you enjoyed this one a bit, and hopefully I was able to give you a bit of explanations on the different paint systems. And I'll see you in my next video. And if you have any comments or recommendations, please do so, because I'm always willing to learn from you. Thank you and have a great day. Bye-bye.